Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the final Sovereignty Studio show of the year, but it's the first Sovereignpreneur show of the new year.
Sort of, yeah.
We're going to rename the show to the Sovereignpreneur. And for reasons you'll find out sooner or later. But just so you know, you're going to see changes on the YouTube channel coming up. But Michael and I are going to review what's happened literally in the last year, because it's pretty much exactly a year ago that you and I finished our trip to El Salvador, our very first trip that triggered this whole adventure.
Yeah, and looking back on it, it's been quite a journey. It's amazing what we can do in a year. It's amazing what one can accomplish. It's amazing. Like, I feel like I lived several lifetimes, and I think it's going to be a good exercise to go back and talk about our journey, talk about the lessons that we learned and the experiences we had, like in a productive fashion, right? In a way where our audience can gain some of the value and insights that we learned, and also hopefully be inspired as well.
Yeah, one of the key tenets of sovereignpreneurship, reflection. Because how are you going to learn and grow if you're not stopping to observe like what's happened to you in the past, failures, successes, what worked, what didn't work, how did something make you feel? How do you move into the future without learning from the past, basically? So let's do it. We got a month by month rundown. We're going to start with December 2023.
All right, so December 2023, right? Jordan and I had been working on my content for, I would say,
well, okay. Hang on, sorry. So I got on Twitter in June 2023 to start like building my brand. I didn't know where I was going. I was like, sovereignty seems like a good theme because I don't want to do just Bitcoin. Bitcoin space kind of weird. And then a few months in, I was doing my second cohort, and you had started following me from my John Vallis podcast because I was into the sovereignty thing. And then you were like, hey, would this help me get better at video? I'm like, hell yeah, it will. So you joined that. And so that was, I think, September. Mm-hmm. So this is only 3 months after meeting each other, basically.
Yeah. And you had it priced, your cohort, at such a ridiculous price that I was like, okay, yeah, this is like a no brainer, because like, even if this sucks, I could just eat the cost. It was like $150 or something like that.
And the first one was free. I basically asked for $40 for expenses, but I let people pay what they wanted. And it was horrible. When you're not having people put a little bit of skin in the game, then no one shows up, no one cares. So I was like, all right, I don't want to charge that much because I'm still figuring my material out. Like, I remember you commented, you were like, yeah, cohorts I've been in them, I'm used to frameworks and modules and all that. And we were just kind of showing up and practicing getting vulnerable on camera and things like that.
Yeah, that's right. Because I had taken Ship 30, and their whole like organization was just top notch as far as like, getting people in and having all the modules and frameworks set up. And so I was kind of expecting the same thing, but at the same time, I found enough value because I saw the potential, and I knew that in order to take my brand to the next level, in order to take my business to the next level, that I needed to do social media content. It's the future. It's just how businesses are going to market themselves going forward. Social media is it. That's my belief. And I knew I had to get better at it. And I saw that you were providing an avenue and a way, even though you were still kind of figuring it out. And so, I just showed up to your cohort as much as I could. And after that, we started working kind of one-on-one, right? You took me on as a private client.
Yet. Yeah, not yet. What happened was, that cohort, I started the Discord community, the creator sovereignty community. So that was my first foray into building an online business, trying to figure it out. And that's, one of the things I tried to share in that kind of coaching was, you have to just do it in the beginning. Don't worry about money so much. Just worry about figuring it out. How can you solve problems with people? How can you enjoy it? And so during that cohort, I had a daily meetup basically on Discord where you show up and you can practice. There's a prompt. And we practiced. And to be honest, I kind of wish I kept that going, but it was such a big... Anyway, we kept meeting up because of that. You kept kind of trickling in there every once a week or something. And then we would obviously stay in touch. I remember I went to Argentina in October, and we were on the phone a bunch of times talking about doing like a travel show. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Well...
We had become friends at that point.
Yeah, long story short, you were like, hey, I think in your mind, you're like, hey, I have potential. You saw potential in me, and you were like, I want to help you take your game to the next level. And you're like, why don't we meet up in El Salvador? Right.
Yeah, that's kind of how I saw it. I don't think I told you it that way at the time, but that's how I saw it. I'm like, Michael really wants to do this. I love making travel videography, following people around. I mean, that was my bread and butter before I had kids. So like, let's do it. And then you were kind of reluctant to come to El Salvador. I think you just didn't want to travel or something.
Well, for me, I was, coming off of a dark time in my life. I was 6 months divorced. I moved out of my 3-bedroom house that I was living in Sarasota, and I was just living in a small trailer. And at that time, I had just made the move out of Sarasota down to Miami. Brought my trailer down there in my buddy's backyard, and I was just trying to find my footing. And taking a trip to El Salvador seemed like a detour from that, right? And you were persistent. You were persistent.
Was I?
Yes, you were. That's what I remember. Like I told you no a couple times, and I don't know if I want to do it, and I was hesitating.
Well, I think what you did one of those shake it off things. Oh yeah, maybe. And then like you don't bring it up again. So I was like, hey.
Yeah. And I think that persistence though, made me realize that okay, Jordan wants to actually take this seriously, and if he's willing to invest in me, I should take this opportunity and see if there's anything there between us where we can build something. And so ultimately decided to come to El Salvador. The game plan was to kind of create Bitcoin content, right? We're both Bitcoiners. El Salvador is Bitcoin country. I want to create content. It's an easy thing to create content around. And when we got here, we realized that, Bitcoin isn't the story, right? We went to the farmer's market. We went to El Zonte, and anything outside of El Zonte was kind of like, Bitcoin was kind of not a thing.
Yeah, what's that?
Yeah.
Well, so you were trying to find your footing, you said, and that led to some like hesitation to leaving. I know, because for me, it was really important to come to El Salvador because we were in a transition period. We knew we were probably not going to stay in Hawaii. The lifestyle wasn't working for the family. And so we were just in California, kind of in purgatory. Like, what are we doing? Argentina, then California. So I was like, El Salvador's been on my list. We should at least check it out.
Yeah.
And so did you have that in your head? Like, maybe I'll move here, or did you just want to see it?
No, El Salvador was not interesting to me at all.
Really?
Yeah. The only reason I came was, to link up with you and shoot some content and see if I could break out of my shell.
And we did. We did that.
Yeah, we did that.
You did that.
And, we took a tour of Bitcoin country. We went Bitcoin Beach. We went to Lake Guadapeque. We went to Santa Ana. We were here 8 days. And like I said, we transitioned from the Bitcoin story to what we realized was the El Salvador story, right? Was the transformation that occurred here under Bukele's leadership. And that's what our content then focused on. We met a bunch of business owners, locals, and we got invited to people's homes, and we went on different adventures. And during that time, I started to really feel the magic of El Salvador.
Yeah, I remember, because when they tell you, oh, don't go to that place, it's dangerous. Like, I basically made my living doing things like that in my 20s. You say it's dangerous. Like, okay, well, what does that mean? But I do specifically remember when I first went to Central America as a 19-year-old, I was in Costa Rica, then went up to Nicaragua, and then everyone said, you don't want to go to Honduras, but you definitely don't want to go to El Salvador because of the gangs. And so I always I had a block off in my mind. Like, you just don't go to certain places because that's how dangerous they are. Even though everyone tells us here, like, oh, if you were a white person or an expat in El Salvador during the gang times, you pretty much had nothing to worry about because that's the only time the police would get involved in violence. But anyway, when you hear that stuff and then you hear, okay, Bukele cleaned up the gangs and you're like, oh, cool, it's safe to go there now. That's one thing. But then coming to get firsthand perspective from the people that lived through that era, which is what we were doing on video. We were interviewing people, talking about what it was like. That just blew it all open for me. Like, these people couldn't go outside after 6 p.m. You getting extorted, blackmail. They're gonna rape your kids, kill your wife. Like, that's just another level of holy shit. And that's what shocked me. And we learned about this in the videos. And I was like, yeah, the Bitcoin story just kind of disappeared. Like, there's something much bigger at play here.
Yeah, I mean, the people were basically liberated. And, I felt like there was a big weight lifted off the country, and you could feel the optimism in the air. And it really was a sense of freedom that I hadn't felt before. Maybe I felt it in my 20s when I was kind of doing my traveling around the world and stuff like that. But, to have that hope and that optimism so palpable, I was just like, I have to come back. Like the 8-day trip that we did wasn't enough.
Yeah, I think freedom is very psychological in the fact that it's very much influenced by your environment. Like you can be happy-go-lucky in your 20s and be the most freest human being ever. But then when you start to build a life and do things and pay taxes and all this stuff, then it's really important the environment you're in to continue feeling free. And so here we are in a place where these people did not know freedom for so long of like pretty much any kind. And then now they have what could be the ultimate freedom. You go outside and feel safe.
Yeah.
Which is something we never had to live without, security like before.
Yeah. And it's not only that, the people are nice. The weather was beautiful during that time of year. We're in December right now, and it's like crisp, clear blue skies every day. Sun is shining. And I just felt some magic here that I haven't felt before. And so we left that trip and went back home. And I don't think we concluded anything, but I think, over the course of December, going back to Miami, and, Miami's my hometown. And for me, it feels stagnant, right? And I was kind of, contemplating where my next steps would be in life. And I knew Miami wasn't it, but I didn't have anywhere else to go. And so El Salvador was continuously popping up on my mind, like, hey, maybe there's something there for me. And I started thinking that all through December. And now jumping into the new year, January, I decided to go back.
Well, like 3 weeks after you returned, right?
Yeah.
Like less than a month later.
Yeah, I went home for, I stayed in Miami for Christmas, spent time with the family, did New Year's. And then I was like, I need to get out of here. And so packed my bag and went to back to El Salvador, this time by myself, and this time for a more extended amount of time. And I just wanted to observe. And, when you travel and you go on vacation and, you're with good company and you're doing the whole adventure thing, there's a sense of euphoria and adventure that you just, it could be misleading sometimes, So I wanted to actually come here and spend some time and observe what life would be like over here. And that's what I did. I took my second trip over here, and it was 17 days. And this time I'm in Bitcoin Beach, and I'm spending the majority of my time at Bitcoin Beach. And what's cool about Bitcoin Beach, I think, as we all have come to learn, is that it's kind of the mecca for Bitcoiners around the world, right? They all go to Bitcoin Beach. It's like the homage you have to pay. And, it was my gateway, and I'm really grateful. I'm grateful for the Bitcoin Beach guys, for all their hospitality, everything they did for me, because I got to meet so many interesting people. I met Luke, and Luke, he's been a friend and an ally ever since. Met a bunch of locals over here, got integrated into the community. And, during that time, I was also looking to see, as I mentioned, whether there was a future here for me. And I got contacted by one of my friends in Miami, and he basically asked me if I wanted to open up an operation there, a logistics operation, basically become the other end. He was in Barbados, Bermuda, Haiti, Honduras, and he was looking for a contact in El Salvador. And he was asking me if I want to do that, since he saw my timeline and saw my posts on El Salvador. And, I saw this as possibly my ticket into El Salvador. I didn't want to come here and just kind of drift and sip margaritas on the beach and kind of, do nothing. I wanted to be productive. I wanted to be able to add some type of value to the community. And I saw that as an opportunity. And so I went back home and...
but on that trip, sorry to interrupt, I believe you also introduced yourself at the Bitcoin meetup, the Bitcoin Beach meetup.
Yes.
And you got a video of it. And I remember you were really proud of that because of your previous fear of public speaking.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was on that trip.
Or was it the next one?
Maybe. I don't know. I think it was maybe on the next one. Or, total. I took like 6 trips over here. So it was on one of those trips. But I guess the moral of the story for January is that the seed was planted for me to build a presence in El Salvador. And, went back home, continue to work on my coaching business. I think we stayed in contact, and we were, you were editing my videos, and I was laying the foundation for Nakamoto Express. I was, but I do want to mention this. In January, during that trip, one thing that really also helped me out was I invited my parents to come, and they came, and they fell in love with the country too. So it was like confirmation, I got the nod of approval from my dad and from my stepmom, and that was cool. And I got to see El Salvador again, this time as like a tour guide, right? But also through the eyes of someone who's discovering the country for the first time. I got to rediscover that magic again. And so, I think that was also a critical, a critical moment in like me kind of planting that seed as El Salvador being a potential home. But yeah, went to Miami. Now we're in February, and most of me is just falling into routine in the United States. And I don't know what you're doing at this time. I don't know where your thoughts are. I think, for you weren't really considering El Salvador as a place to move yet. Is that right?
No, it's still a possibility, but I still had other things to figure out. Yeah, and I was still just working to try to create my online business and kind of just continuing the hustle I had been doing. I hadn't really sidetracked anything yet.
Yeah, well, okay, so I'm in the US, and I am working on Nakamoto Express with my business partner Lorenzo over there, and we're working on agreements. We're actually figuring out, if this is a viable option, if we can do it. I've never been in a logistics business. It's a foreign country. I don't speak Spanish. I need the right contacts. I need the right people. So what we did was just basically, go on Google Maps and, start searching for potential partners and start calling people up, like literally, like just starting from scratch. And we found some potential partners. And so me and Lorenzo said, okay, let's figure this out. Let's go over there. I'm going to have a meeting with our potential partners, with the lawyer. And, during that time, so I went back again. I think this is, for the third time I'm back there, and I'm also writing about, El Salvador and my experience there. And I'm also learning about the history, and I get the attention of President Bukele. And he starts retweeting me. So, along this journey, you're waiting for all these. Well, you're not necessarily waiting, but like, I feel like when a path is meant for you to go down, right? Like the universe kind of conspires to help see you through.
I think it was in February. Is that when your podcast clip went viral?
No,
the one we made, was that March?
Not. Yeah, it was around there. Yeah, but this is where you're gonna come, I think, back into the story. We can just jump right in there.
Well, no, just to create that thread. It is interesting, these like confirmation signs from the universe, right? In the forms of your response, your audience response on Twitter, right? Mm-hmm. In December, that first morning after we had arrived, I had written a post just about what I was seeing so far in El Salvador, and we were just in Zante, and essentially just still looks like a little village, not overdeveloped or anything. But I had been reading about everything happening in El Salvador, and so I just wrote a thing about how in my travels I've seen development and tourism destroy places, and I just don't want to see that happen here. So I hope we as Bitcoiners or expats trying to spend time here can be responsible. And that, after 6 months of working on my Twitter brand, that post had a better response than anything I'd ever made before, pretty much, in regards to building a business, to anything. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Like people, like my audience isn't there for El Salvador. But that was my first hint that I didn't take. It took another 6 months before I started realizing, wow, people really want El Salvador content. But you started seeing it just a month or two later.
Yeah.
People are hungry for it.
Yeah. And so now we're going into March. This is where I go to a mastermind with PDB and AJAC. And honestly, shout out to those guys, right? Like they gave me a huge opportunity to be on a podcast with, some influential people as they are. And, that podcast I recorded on my phone. And that
was your first podcast appearance.
And this is after, all the work that we've been doing. For those that don't know, I was having a horrible time trying to speak on camera. I was having a horrible time just speaking in public in general. It's always been something I struggle with all my life. And so, to do that, to break out of my shell was it's a big milestone for me. But not only that, I sent that video to you, and you worked with your team of editors, and you put together this like just monster video. Like, I mean, like I got it's like they were like, everyone was asking me who edited my video from that.
And it's funny because the reason that video turned out so cool is because the main shot that you provided, that I don't know whose camera it was, but it was just not a very good shot. So we had to get really creative with it. And that's when we put Bukele up there walking, and that like made the video. I think that's what made it so cool.
Well, everything. Also, the words that we highlighted, I think had a lot to do with it. I remember initially your editor had like he was highlighting the kind of negative words.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, you got to change that to positive words. And it just, it painted the opportunity that El Salvador offers. And it also highlighted the changes that occurred. And it was just visually like really entertaining and well done. And we remember our goal for editing that video.
Get a Bukele retweet.
To get a Bukele retweet.
Yeah,
and it happened like an hour later after I posted it.
Yeah.
So, it showed me that, hey, if you go into something with an intention and you focus on that intention and that goal, and you like, you can make things happen in this world. Yeah.
And like to your point about, going to El Salvador to explore working with me and blah, blah, blah. It's just more and more confirmation signs from all over the place. Like I looked at that thread today. It looks like it has 125,000 views.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think it broke 100,000 pretty quickly back when we posted it.
Yeah. And in March, I don't know if you remember, but you come back to El Salvador too.
Yeah, at the end of March. I came back for the having party, but we spent a week before that just trying to get on the same page. Like, hey, let's build something in El Salvador. What's it going to be?
Yeah, I think going back to like, the confirmation signs that there's a potential here to build something really big, unique, and meaningful. I think you started feeling that with the Bukele retweet and all the attention that we were getting.
Yeah, well, I think we both felt it, because after that, that's when we first coined Sovereignty Studios, and like the domain was available, so we bought it. That was before I came back to El Salvador. Yeah. And so then you got your Build in El Salvador mailing list going, and then I don't think we started the community calls till after back in April. But yeah, so Sovereignty Studios started pretty much in March.
Yeah.
And then I came back at the end of March, and our first gig was at the having party.
Yeah, and going back to it, I don't think we really had a plan for what Sovereignty Studios was going to be or what we were going to build over here. I think we just both knew that media was the ticket, right?
Yeah, I think even if you look online now, it's basically just Stacey Herbert and Bukele with like the El Salvador content. Yeah. Max posts something here and there, and then random people post something here and there. But I think you and I saw like, oh, wait a minute, we could kind of become like a voice here. Like we're able to get the attention, we're able to impress people with the media, like there's something there.
Yeah. And yeah, also we worked on my brand. Remember the Venn diagram,
the Venn.
Yeah. And it was like, to work on a brand, you really need to hone in on your messaging. You got to define the scope of the conversations that you're going to have and the things you're going to write about. And it was just very obvious. It was like Bitcoin, entrepreneurship, and El Salvador. It's like we focus all our content within that, and we're going to attract a certain segment of people. And so that was huge. That was huge because before that, all my content was just scattered everywhere. There wasn't anything coherent. And I think that doing that exercise really allowed me to focus in on what mattered and what was important, especially towards building something meaningful. And yeah, after that, I gained so much clarity. And going back to March, I'm still focused on Nakamoto Express. Sovereignty Studios is just a little baby. We secured the domain name and we threw some ideas around. And remember, we were in the house on the volcano.
Yeah, I think we have the picture, right?
I don't know if
yeah, you put the auto timer on, and we set up a whole workspace with all these extra monitors.
Yeah, and we were just basically building out the beginnings of Sovereignty Studios and how we were going to make an impact over here. But that was interesting because we were so isolated up there, which was a good thing because it allowed us to concentrate. But then at the same time, we were being pulled like in El Zonte, and that was like go down the volcano, right? Then you got to drive all the way to El Zonte, which is like another hour away. And it was like, but we did it, and it was awesome. And we go into April now, and April's a having party.
Well, even actually real quick, if I could just throw something in. That last week of March before the having party, we were there in the volcano, and we would go to Zonte. We went to a Bitcoin Beach meetup. And I remember that night was the first time I really realized like, oh, there's a future for me here, because everyone does their little introductions. And I introduced myself. Hey, I'm going to move my family here. I want my kids to grow up in a place that values freedom. And I love making videos, love making content. If anyone wants to make content, let me know. And a bunch of people came up to me after saying, hey, I need content, I need video, blah, blah. I was like, whoa, I was not expecting that. And that led to some opportunities, some that worked out, some that fizzled out. But that was like the moment I was like, okay, there's something here that is falling onto our lap that is not falling on my lap anywhere else.
Yeah. So, okay, we were pretty exhausted, remember? And we were like contemplating whether we want to go to the having party or not. I don't know if you remember that, but we're like, do we even go over there? It's like been a long week of driving up and down the volcano and going all over to these meetups. I was kind of like already, out of
Not
gas.
ready for a 4-day party.
Yeah. But thank God we did, because first of all, the having party, that setting for me was one of the best kind of conference settings that I've ever been to, right? It was tropical vibes. You could go listen to the speakers if you wanted to, but if you didn't, there was this whole resort full of Bitcoiners where you could find yourself in all types of interesting conversations. That's when we met Eric V. Stacks. Remember that? We did. So this is also what really broke me out of my shell too, because during that time, it was just back to back content. We were just waking up every day and doing content. This is when I started getting into my 5-minute podcasts.
Yep.
And then being at the Bitcoin conference, you're talking to all these kind of smart, sophisticated, intellectual people. So I kind of was able to gauge, like where I'm at as far as conversational level. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I can hold my own having these conversations on camera with these people. And it really gave me a lot of confidence as far as like making content is concerned. And that was the having party. It was awesome.
Yeah, the having party was super cool. And so what we went around and we asked people certain questions and kind of interviewed them, and we got a lot of content out of it. So not only was it your 5-minute podcast, but we asked people, is Bitcoin a cult? Why? What do you think of El Salvador and Bukele? And then like, what do you think of the having party? And so we made 3 or 4 videos from it. I forget how many. And it was in partnership with Bitcoin News.
Was that your first kind of partnership with Bitcoin News?
It wasn't the first time I'd worked with them, but it was the first like partnership. Yeah. So they found a sponsor so we can get paid to edit that, for example. And so we put those videos together, and they had a really good response on X. Maybe not like viral, but good response. Everyone in the community liked it. A few Max Kaiser retweets. But I was proud of those videos too, just from like a storytelling perspective, because there's something about the philosophical depth of Bitcoin that you don't really get. I didn't really get until I was with a bunch of Bitcoin. Like that was my first Bitcoin event, was that having party.
Oh, really?
I mean, pretty much. I'd never been to a conference. Like, I guess Bitcoin Beach meetup, sure. But like that was my first real like concentrated few days with Bitcoiners. And so starting to really feel that depth from a community level, being able to put those videos together. Like I think one of them's called like Why We Bitcoin. And by the way, these are the very first videos on the YouTube channel, if you want to check them out, anyone. But like one of them is like, why do we choose Bitcoin? And it's all about, central banking is evil from a moral perspective, ethical perspective. That was the first time I'd ever really explored that argument, how like it's unethical to use dollars and to be in the dollar system, right? Because it's theft. Central bank inflation, it's like printing money is theft. And like, if you agree with that, then okay, fine, use dollars. But so it really some deep questions you have to ask yourself, right? Which, I mean, I'd been saving in Bitcoin for years for many reasons, but I'd never really done it for that reason.
Was it basically another layer down the rabbit hole then for you?
Yeah, it was the community feel. I would say it was spawned by the community feel of being with all the people. We had so many interviews, hearing all these different perspectives from people, and then a chance to montage it all together into these 4 videos was just a really good, few steps deeper into the rabbit hole for me.
You know what? Looking back on it, I think for me, it's the first time I felt Bitcoin's social layer. If that's a good way to put it, right? Like I had been to plenty of conferences all the way dating back to 2012. And, I always didn't like the corporate feel. I didn't like the shit coins. I didn't like the conversations I was having. But over there, it felt like, okay, like these are my people. Like these are, Bitcoiners who get it, who actually want to, build a world that transcends the fiat system. And so like I said, I really enjoyed that conference. It was the best conference I had been to. And it was just the magic that I felt over there. On top of also like, hitting some milestones and breaking some barriers in my life too.
And that for me was another big sign like, hey, El Salvador. And obviously that was kind of a conference, a party where people traveled in to be together. But that whole vibe was just like, wow, this is the kind of vibe happening in El Salvador. I want to be around this. Part of why we couldn't live in Hawaii anymore was just because the community had no ambition, and I wanted to do something. I wanted to build something to make a better world. And, starting to see like, oh, wow, it's really happening in El Salvador, even if people are just coming in and out and not everyone's stationary here. But like that energy is alive and thriving here.
Yeah.
And that was huge for me.
Yeah. I thought it was a big thing for you too, because, I was trying to convince you of that, I think a little bit. During this whole time, I'm like, Jordan, you should, come down here and move your family, this and that. I mean, it's a big ask, right? It's a big ask. Yeah. And so I think that was a pivotal moment in you kind of like understanding that there's a future here.
Yeah, there's a lot going on for sure.
Meanwhile, it was still in April. PDB comes down to check out El Salvador. I'm acting kind of like as a liaison service for him, kind of showing him around, hanging out with him. It was awesome. Shout out to PDB. And he, that was, I think, the beginnings of like thinking of possibly opening up some type of tour guide business, some type of liaison business, right? Also during that time, you hadn't made the decision to move down here yet. You were still, you still had to go back home and
convince my wife.
Yeah. And so, for me, the only thing that I could really fall back on was Nakamoto Express. So I continued pursuing that. We completed our test package run. And so we were open for business, basically. And we got our first customer. Shout out to Matt. We shipped down all his S9s. And at the end of April, that's when I started, doing real estate listing, like showcasing real estate listings. So remember that? Because part of what we were doing in April too, during that week, we were looking at housing, we were looking at rentals. And so we were like, well, if we're going to do this, we might as well make content out of it. And because there's just so much interest in El Salvador, let's see if they're, interested in places to live. And so we started shooting real estate videos. And
well, who was the agent? What was her name?
Oh man, I forgot.
Yeah, she was so sweet. She took us to so many places.
Yeah, she was awesome.
Yeah, but she was in one of our videos.
Yeah, I mean, but
people were really curious about the real estate, right? People are like really wanting to know what are prices like this and that. So we were making those videos, and I think a company even offered you a commission or something if you sold a house, right?
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing, right? Like El Salvador is still so fresh, still so nascent. It's been, in the dark for like 50 years, and now it's finally being opened up and being discovered by the world. So there's so much to develop here, and there's not any real like real estate infrastructure here. And the idea of like showcasing real estate hadn't really been explored here. And so, had a real estate company reach out to me and say, hey, we've been watching your videos on Twitter. Do you want to showcase some real estate listings? And I was like, well,
why not?
For me, I was just exploring opportunities, and I was like, yeah, okay, let's do it. And you edited those videos, and they turned out pretty awesome. And Max Kaiser started retweeting them. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, after the having party, I think we both go back home. I think you're talking to your wife during that time. I don't know if you remember.
I was ready to make the steps. I don't think you believed me, but at that point I was like, all right. Because at that point for me too, I knew like, sure, I could keep hustling and grinding on like building the online business, but I didn't really want to. And I have it in my notes. If there's anything I really learned this year, it's that like, it feels really good to work with people in real life as a team. You know, like I think we kind of fell away from that a bit because of COVID shit, whatever.
Yeah, like
but
the solopreneur route, right?
Yeah, and I'd been the solopreneur route for over a decade, right? And so once we were here and then the community, and I was like, wow, we could build something here. I was kind of like, man, like I'd much rather do that than keep grinding to build I mean, don't get me wrong, I would love to build a one-man empire online and make a fortune, and I will one day. But as far as enjoying life and feeling fulfilled and having companionship and community, like I don't think anything trumps what we started doing here in June.
Yeah. So May comes around. Yeah. For me,
sorry. So my point is, I recognized that in April by the time I left. I was like, all right, let's make this happen. But you weren't going to believe it until like you saw it.
Yeah.
Until I had the lease signed.
Well, just because you were like, hey man, I don't know, like I see what you're talking about. I know you knew it, but like you have a wife and a family.
I got kids that got to go to school. Yeah, there's a lot of details to iron out.
So, I just couldn't rely on like I didn't know whether it was a for sure thing, and I don't think you did either, but I knew that you felt the magic, and I knew that you saw that there was a future here. It's just a matter now of like, tying off loose ends wherever you're at and convincing the family to come down.
Yeah. And I remember in that trip, we were looking at real estate and we found a house that was good size for my family, not too far from here. And I was like, wow. And I told my wife like, hey, this could be perfect. And then she Googled it and there was like a school, like not too 5 minutes away from that house. And we looked into that school and it's like a complete libertarian school. Like they teach you like from preschool on, they teach these kids to be entrepreneurs, have values of freedom and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, whoa, like, of course we want to live by that school. That's where the kids. So all the signs just kept adding up.
Yeah.
Right?
Wasn't it? Okay. So I remember our real estate agent's name, Janet.
Janet.
Yeah. Was that her house that she was going to move out of?
Original, yeah. But this is funny because then my wife came and like we checked it out and we were like, okay, cool, let's live here. But actually, it may have been even before my wife came. It was after that. I was like, Janet, let me talk to the owners. Like, I want to rent this out. But I didn't have enough paperwork that they wanted to see all your bank statements, blah, blah, blah. And for the last few years, I was just like grasping by financially with credit cards and loans and selling some Bitcoin here and there and living in my own house in Hawaii. So I had nothing. And then no matter what we provided them, they just weren't going to do it.
Gotcha.
They weren't going to do it. And so Janet was like, yeah, sorry, this is El Salvador. They require lots of documentation.
Yeah.
But it was a blessing because here we are in a place much better.
Yeah. So going back, okay, so we're April, now we're May, and I'm back in Miami. You're back home, and you're figuring out whether it's feasible to move down here or not. And sometime in May, I go back to El Salvador for the 5th time. I think it was because President Bukele was getting inaugurated, and I just wanted to be here for that. I got invited on my second podcast. This time it was a bigger podcast, Zuby's podcast. Mm-hmm. I just remember being so nervous that night before. I was, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep beforehand, and it was just nerves were just getting the better of me. But you know what? I went and I did the podcast anyways. I thought I bombed. I didn't, but nothing but good things came from it, right? And I realized, even if you bomb, nobody cares really, right? You like, you always think of the worst case scenario and just put that into consideration. Just be like, can you deal with that? Okay, you can deal with that, then fine. And that's basically, it gave me a lot of confidence to go on other podcasts in the future, right? It was like, okay, look, that's the worst I can do. It only goes up from here. So anyways, I think at the end of the May, that's when you come with your wife. So I think you convinced her enough to come and check out the country. And during this time, you're looking for housing, right? Because like you said, it wasn't going to work out with Janet's property. They wanted too much documentation. And so you're like, okay, I need to figure something else out.
Yeah. So that trip was exclusively to find a place, but also to make sure she liked it enough to want to live here. I think she already knew that there wasn't much choice in the way of just opportunity and things to do. And, you know, we're closer to her family in Argentina here. So it's not like it's a huge hard sell. But yeah, we had to find a place to live. First and foremost for her is having a nice home. And we scoped it out, and she found us this block where we all ended up. So
Yeah. So Sovereignty Studios now is going to happen for real. That's the way I saw it. It's like, okay, we're for real. We're going to be, creating a media studio over here. And we start working with Adopting Bitcoin. I think they reach out to us or me, and they're like, hey, we want to create some promotional material around Adopting Bitcoin. And I mean,
oh, that's right. Yeah.
yeah. So that's the beginnings of our partnership with Adopting Bitcoin. And during that time, also my friends from Miami visit, another, again, acting as a tour guide, acting as a liaison, showing them around. And they have a blast, and I have a blast with them. And then during that time, we also meet a couple girls from California. They join in, and so when my friends left, I'm still hanging out with them, and I give them another tour of El Salvador and show.
That was in May.
This is now in June,
beginning of June.
Yeah,
right.
And I show them around, and again, it's just like a realization that okay, this is a viable thing for me to do. This is a viable avenue to pursue.
There's one thing we forgot to mention, and that is in March, and I saw it on our Twitter feeds. In March, we started trying to host spaces. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
I don't think we did more than 2, but about like El Salvador, and I think even like branding. And then we started the community calls. So people, were seeing the hype, seeing the momentum. We had our first community call in March, and I don't think as many people showed up as that first one as since. Like there were like 30 people there that first time. Remember that?
Yeah.
And that's how we met Matias, our producer here.
Yeah. Okay. During all of that, we're like, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to need some help. We're also going to want to build a community. We're going to build a network. There's obviously all this interest in El Salvador. How are we going to capture this? And that's when we got the idea to put together an incubator, put together community calls and so forth. And so, yeah, we started our little online information kind of infrastructure during that time. And It was super helpful because, like you said, when we come down in June, it isn't long. It actually is that week, right? That we moved in, that Matias joins the team.
Yeah, I think I got in on the 20th, Matt get in on the 26th, and you got in on the 27th or something. It was like all in the same week. We all showed up here and hit the ground running.
Yeah, because I think in June, after my friends left, I went back to Miami to maybe get some stuff. And when you signed the lease, I signed the lease.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went back to Miami to pick up all my stuff and come back down. I think also, another reason for me going down there was like if we were going to do Sovereignty Studios, we needed all this equipment, right? We needed the podcast set up and everything like that. So we bought everything on Amazon, and that's why I went back to pick up all the stuff and bring it back.
Yeah. Was that before you moved in June, or was that another trip after in July? Because you had to get your dog too.
It was June. It was June.
Okay.
I came back with all the podcast equipment. Yeah. And
podcast version 1.
Yeah. In July was
when we really got the routine going.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, we're going to show up at the table every day. We're going to get this show going. How are we going to make money? What are we going to do? And then, like you said, we started working with Adopting Bitcoin. They wanted promotional material. You did an interview with, I think, Kiki and Charlie, right? And then Matt edited them to make them sexy. And then they were like, yeah, let's come up with an agreement.
And that was big because that gave us work for the next.
Give us something to do.
Gave us something to do.
Give us purpose.
Purpose, yeah. We also went to the Miss Bitcoin art show, Matias and I, and this is the first time I saw him in action and what he can do in terms of videography.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa.
It is funny how many things we would just do in the beginning just for the chance to check it out, see if we want to do it. And look at us now. We're like, no, leave the house now.
Well, I think that's just the natural progression.
It has
of growth.
to be.
Yeah. you just got to explore your options, and then you figure out what you like, what you don't like, where you provide the most value, what aligns with you the most, and you just double down on that.
Yep.
It's kind of like content too, pushing content out to Twitter. You kind of figure out what your niche is. And I think that's just a process that you got to go through. And that was super cool. We met so many interesting people, did so many interesting things.
Started building a network.
Started building the network. Yep. And so now it's July, right? And like you said, we're in a routine. Podcast studio gets renovated. I go up to Miami, pick up Lily. I signed my lease. Now it's time to bring my dog. And during that time, we also are brainstorming, okay, how can we make money? And the retreat, I think, is something that you were pretty adamant about that we need to do. And
it just made the most sense to me based on all the excitement we'd observed on Twitter,
Yeah. And I think we all agreed. And so we started.
We also wanted to do an incubator. I mean, we still do, but all the pieces aren't aligned yet.
Yeah.
Still. But we were talking about that pretty seriously back then as well.
Yeah. And we even, dude, we put together a form to capture some of that interest, and we had 75 people sign up. So it's holy cow, there's a lot of people that want to work here, Yeah. But then, thinking about it, in that form, a lot of people, their biggest struggle was, okay, how am I going to make money?
Yeah.
So
I need a job. And a lot of people were approaching us online saying, hey, I'll do anything for a job in El Salvador, basically.
Yeah. And so, we started looking for a venue for the retreat. I remember this is the beginnings of a retreat. Yeah.
Man, that was July already. We were looking for the venue, or August?
It was
July.
Moved at rapid speed. It's
crazy.
Dude. Every day showing up to the table, it does a lot. If you just chip away every day, man, you can do a lot in a short amount of time.
And we were taking field trips to different beaches to look at places, potential hotels to rent, and all that.
Yeah, and then that was
July.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's when we encounter our neighbor, Julian. And Julian's like, hey, we tell him, hey, yeah, we're doing a retreat and we're struggling looking for venues. He's like, well, why don't you just do it at my place?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a little more synchronistic than that even, because here we are, it's July, there's no school. My wife and I are like, why do we move here in the summer when there's no school, no friends? We're in a neighborhood where no one lives here yet. And my kids are just going crazy. Even if there are neighborhood kids, they speak Spanish. My kids don't speak Spanish yet. So one afternoon, we're out here riding scooters or whatever, and we're going back to the house. And suddenly I hear little toddler age kids talking to their mom in English. I want to do that. No, get in the house. I was like, wait a minute. I do a double take and I walk back excuse me, are you speaking English? Cool. They're like, oh yeah, we're from Texas. I was like, oh my gosh. And it turns out they have kids the same age as my kids. They're literally 2 houses down. And then Julian, the father of the kids, comes home a little while later. And then you come walking by a little while after that at the first meeting. And he's like, oh yeah, come check out the Bitcoin Mansion. And we're like, whoa.
Yeah, and again, it's just further confirmation, right? El Salvador is just a special place where these, synchronicities happen. And, I think it has a lot to do with, El Salvador position in the world. It's, a beacon of hope, and it's attracting a lot of like-minded people. And so it feels like things just kind of fall into place, And it was just further confirmation on that. Man, this. And we would talk about it, right, a lot. We would say, it feels like all these doors are just opening up, that we would be dishonoring God if we did not walk through them.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
It's probably on an early episode of the podcast.
So, and so we lock into Bitcoin Mansion as the place to go to for our retreat, and we start creating promotional material around that in July already, just 1 month in.
Yeah, because the retreat was going to be early September.
Yeah. So the Adopting Bitcoin, series didn't really start until August. That's when we did our first shoot with the young kids from Azteca.
The Martinez Bros.
The Martinez Bros, yeah.
They were also the first guests on the podcast.
Yeah. And during this time, no, I think it was Fabian.
Oh, Fabian was, that's right. Yeah,
they were second.
They were second.
Yeah, in-house guests. And we continue to plan out our retreat, and we continue to push out promotional material. And
suddenly you get a DM.
Suddenly I get a DM. Mr. Max Kaiser hits me up and says, hey, doing a retreat in Bitcoin country in my backyard.
Yeah.
And he's like, you want us to be part of it? And I was like, yeah. He's like, all right, we're in. And so I was like, holy cow, talk about doors just opening and things falling into place. I remember telling you guys I was so excited because it was a big breakthrough for us, you know? Yeah, that really lit a fire on us to really just not do a retreat, but actually do a launch party. Like to announce that Sovereignty Studios is here and it's open for business.
Yeah. And Max Kaiser's going to be at the launch party.
Yeah. And we start selling and it felt good. Remember that? Like, you know, we start selling rooms for our retreat, and it was just an amazing feeling that I hadn't felt before to get consistent sales like that and see money flowing in, even though it was all flowing out too.
Yeah, it flowed out faster than it flowed in.
But you know, it really felt like, okay, we got a business here.
Yeah, I think we mentioned it in one of these other podcasts because I was looking at the clips yesterday. But like, I think you said we ended up going like 10,000 over budget or something. But we also threw an epic launch party, and it's like, and we got all this content and social proof out of it. Like we made a name for ourselves, like, and it was 10,000 pretty well spent.
Yeah, that's a marketing budget.
Yeah,
you know, that's a marketing expense. You know, normal startup expense. You know.
Yeah, but there was one, I guess, gaffe we kind of made, which was we had this launch party, which was, I don't know, fairly modest and humble. It wasn't that like, I don't know, but the video, we ended up making such cool media of it that people were like, oh, these crypto bros coming to party. Like, it wasn't that big of a party. Like, we're in a Congo line doing the Macarena. But the way the video was so professionally done, it made it look like it was just like a real fancy, luxurious party, a launch party. So people kind of started commenting to us, right? Like, hey, you know, we understand what you guys are doing, but just be aware of the image you're putting out.
Yeah, and I think it was fair criticism, but at the same time, we had worked so hard. I remember up to the retreat. I mean, I was putting in 12-hour days. I was dreaming about the retreat. I was thinking about the retreat. Like it was not only that.
Knock on my window in the middle.
Yeah.
Like, hey, Jordan, I just thought of something for the retreat.
Yeah, and so we really put our heart and soul into it. And you know, by the launch party, I think we figured, you know, whatever goes wrong after here, we did our we did our job, you know, and we were just celebrating. We were just thrilled that, you know, 3-4 guys could randomly put something like this together and bring a whole community together. And the launch party was really good. Like we had speakers, it was inspirational. We
hosted it.
Yeah.
That was another big, you know, continuation of the thread, right? Coming out of the shell and all that.
Yeah. I mean, this is the first time I was on stage, and then not only that, in front of Max and Stacy.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, listen, like it wasn't, I don't see it as too big of a gaffe. Like, yeah, we did kind of show that the party side of things a little bit. But at the same time, it was a celebration of what we've accomplished. And, you know, it's a learning lesson and we move forward.
You know, and also one thing not to forget is in that time, I don't think it lasted very long, but in that little era, we were still considering, oh, maybe we're a complete media and events company. Like people hire us to put on events. So we needed to show that we could put on a cool event, like a cool party.
Yeah, we were just still figuring it out.
Exactly. So that was just kind of part of the experience. But I would say that whole retreat, that whole 5 days or whatever it was kind of a big party for us. And we were proud of ourselves because we did so much prep. We put everything together so well that we pretty much just partied the whole 4 days. Not like hardcore partying, but we relaxed. We enjoyed ourselves and nothing went wrong. You know, everything was well
done.
Yeah, everything went smoothly.
No, it went more than smoothly. That's what was so incredible. It's like not one thing went wrong, you know? And to host, I think 22 people plus 100 plus people.
That party,
for 4 days, is not one thing go wrong is incredible in my opinion. Like we were truly blessed. And so, yeah, we wanted to celebrate a little bit. So
must be interesting hearing this story from the beginning. From the audience perspective, because like we keep saying, like, oh, and this flowed, and then we got validation there, and the signs from the universe there. It's just like, yeah, even to the point that retreat, how did it go so perfectly? That party, everything went just so perfectly.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it gave us a lot of confidence. It showed me that we can work together as a team. It showed me that we can run a business. It showed me that people will pull their weight when it's time to pull their weight. Like, I just gained a lot of confidence in what we were doing.
And it showed others that we were serious.
So August was, I think, we jumped into September, but like going back to August, it was we get contacted by Max and Stacy, but I also get on the Bitcoin Beach podcast, which was another big deal that helped us out.
Tickets,
and then also the Bean of Fire delivery over here, like, to get presidential recognition, to have the Bean of Fire personally delivered by the president's staff. And then
Matt makes a commercial out of it that goes wild on the internet.
Yep. And then like it was just, again, so many things falling into place. And then Max Kaiser reaches out to us. He's like, "Hey, you want to come over and do a video on my golf cart?" And we're like,
was that August?
That was August.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah. The golf cart video.
August, I think, was a huge month for us. And then it capped off with the retreat in September.
Yeah. And that golf cart video was fun. It was great. It had good retention, if I remember correctly. It's kind of like a podcast on a golf cart, more or less, with some added lifestyle, fun, vloggy elements. But yeah, that was a fun video to make. And then it showed us also what else is going on, not just to see him building Huddle House Studio, but we got to see El Encanto.
Yeah.
We got to see what's considered one of the nicest areas to live in. We got to see what people are up to over there. And it helped us feel like we're able to traverse the different rungs of society here.
Yeah. All of a sudden we're in a country club where the rich and famous hang out. And
yeah.
So I'm like, holy cow, how did we end up here?
Yeah.
From living in my trailer to doing videos with Max Kaiser was a big jump for me.
And so actually it was on that day that Max told us about the Max and Stacy Invitational, and we were like, "Oh, do you need media help?" And he put us in touch with the team, who then soon hired us. I don't know if it was in August or September, but they hired us to come in January to do the media for the golf tournament.
Yeah, it's just how one thing leads to another. As long as you continue to pursue your mission, continue to pursue your purpose, like, things will fall into place. I am a huge believer of that, and it just, especially putting in good work, honest work, people pick up on that, and we came here wanting to help. And I think that's genuine. It's authentic. I think all of us have that within us. And I think people will recognize that. But yeah, so also in September, it continues, right? We continue on with the...
So the retreat ends around September 9th, 10th. We acted like we were going to take time off, but we didn't.
No,
we get right back into it.
Right back into it. I go to Campo Bello and I...
Oh yeah, the very next weekend, right?
Yeah, man. And I was exhausted. Looking back on that, I was so tired over there. But the show must go on, right?
Because we were looking for a different venue for the retreat too.
Yeah, and also we want to capture the momentum, right? So I was like, we can't lose the momentum. Let's keep it going. Even though I'm tired, let's go. So we went to Campo Bello, which is an absolutely stunning property. Shout out to Edwin. He's been also a big friend to Sovereignty Studios and what we've been doing.
And that property is even more stunning now, because I just went a few weeks ago, and they have the new restaurant open, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah, I got to go back. And then I didn't mention this, but we also did a meetup in August, and then in September is our second meetup.
Oh yeah, the meetups.
Yeah, so we started trying to do our own meetups and seeing what kind of community of videographers, photographers,
and those had impressive turnouts.
Yeah. And it made me realize, people are paying attention to us, and people want to collaborate and work with us. So our podcast starts hitting the top 10 of Fountain. Remember that?
Yeah, but that's only because we got really big tips. So that's based on the highest rewarded podcast, the top 10 highest zapped podcasts of the week. So we got 2 weeks in a row, we got a 100,000 sat tip, and so that put us on the list, which was great because it expanded our audience and our reach.
Awesome, yeah. And then we also meet Aaron Murphy. He comes by and does a podcast.
Is that September?
September too.
Yeah.
Things happen. I mean, things happen fast here, and they happen in big ways.
Yeah, and not too long after that, we went to Murph's Life.
Yeah, that's in October. We go to his farm, and then a partnership forms with him, a friendship forms with him. He joins in for our next retreat.
Gives a tour.
And October, Tommy comes, and we consider him basically our second incubee. Coming down here to see if he can work for Sovereignty Studios,
and he had been on the retreat. he had been part of the retreat. He really liked what we were doing. He's like, hey, I kind of want to spend more time in El Salvador. Can we do something together?
And yeah, and you know what that showed me? Tommy came in, and Tommy's, man, a young dude with full of energy, and just
he ripped it up.
You notice his presence, man. He's just loud, he's big, and he works, and he's filled with great ideas. Shout out to Tommy.
Yeah.
And it showed me that, we can attract top talent. We can attract top talent to what we're doing over here. We haven't pursued that since Tommy, but I think it's something that we're going to pursue in 2025.
Well, we attracted that before that with Matt. Remember, like one of the first 2 weeks we were here, we were like, what do you think of Matt? And you were like, dude, he's top talent. Like, how do we get him here?
Well, yes, but you could also think of it as a fluke, right? Because it didn't. Matt came in June, and we hadn't had anyone like that come by.
I guess, yeah. But once again, in retrospect, we're like, wow, everything's lining up perfectly for what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. So I think Tommy brought like a new energy to Sovereignty Studios. It gave me an idea of what we, talent that we can attract, and it was big. And during this time, October, Adopting Bitcoin is in November. It's November is like Bitcoin month over here. So it was crunch time for us to finish the Adopting Bitcoin videos. So we go on overdrive. I think we did 5 videos that month or something like that.
In October?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a lot.
And
we had to finish figuring the next retreat out in November.
Yeah. And then we moved the podcast studio up here where we're at right now. We start renovating.
Got new equipment.
Somewhere in there. Did we get new? Yeah, somewhere in there I go back to Miami.
Yeah. Well, because the lesson was, okay, people are taking us seriously now. There's momentum here. Like, let's decide to up the game. And so that manifested in upgrading the equipment, upgrading the studio. And someone could argue that it's not completely necessary. We could have just kept doing what we were doing, but we also want to feel like things are progressing as well. And having higher quality picture makes us feel like it's more serious.
Yeah. And, I'm going to, I guess, stop in October because I really couldn't, I didn't have the time to get to November and December, but, I figured that we could just do it by.
Oh, we got it.
By memory. But, we got Svetsky in here. We start getting.
Well, hang on. Let's finish like more in October, right? So October, we didn't have Max coming to the retreat. We had to figure out how to market it on our own.
Yes.
And so 2 things, like I put out a thread that started to go viral. And then the very next day, my Bitcoin Beach podcast aired, but we still weren't booking a lot of calls. So we had to dive into like the dynamics of our whole little funnel there. Like, why are people clicking the book a call link, but they're not booking the call? Like, what's going on there? And we had a lot to figure out in that realm. But then every Friday I released a thread, and like for like 3 weeks, they got more and more viral. And then they started going downhill. But that helped a lot in bringing attention to the retreat, and a handful of the people at the retreat were from those threads. And for me, that was a big deal because I'd never gone viral before, at least like on X.
Well, that's what I mean by Tommy coming in and bringing a new energy. I feel like everyone's writing improved because he was around.
And we were writing threads for Sovereignty Studios, and the newsletter we were taking more seriously. Like October, we really explored our like textual presence online and tried to figure out what that meant, as opposed to just video, which is all we've been doing.
Yeah, and it was a necessary process to go down. Like, and one of the things I learned is like, people here, they cheer you on and they go to bat for you and they want to support you. But like, especially if you're doing something new, right? But once you've proven yourself, it's like, all right, training wheels are off. Let's see what you can do,
Yeah.
So it's like the second retreat. Also, I think the proximity of it, might have had something to do with it. But like, we just, I don't want to say the support, but just the buzz that we attracted with the first retreat wasn't there for the second retreat. And so we really had to rely on like marketing and selling it through our own means, which taught us a lot too.
It taught us a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it influenced our decisions for how we're doing this moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, when you don't have Max and Stacy there as promotional material, I mean,
acting as credibility, right? Yeah. They were basically vouching for us.
Yeah. Shout out to Max and Stacy. You guys have been a huge help. I can't tell you how much we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now going to November.
The retreat.
Oh man, lesson we learned, right? we threw the retreat the same week as adopting Bitcoin.
Which was a good idea in theory, and a lot of the guests appreciated that, but it was took a toll on us.
Yeah, can you talk about the thought process there?
Well, yeah, like just stacking these events. So someone wants to go to El Salvador, adopting Bitcoin's going on. Oh, there's a retreat the week leading into adopting Bitcoin. I can go discover El Salvador with the Sovereignty Studios guys, and then I can go to adopting Bitcoin. And then some of the people that came on the retreat weren't planning on going to, like when they first were on our sales call, they didn't even know about adopting Bitcoin. And then they decided to go to adopting Bitcoin because we had stacked it so close. So Sunday to Thursday was a retreat. Friday to Sunday was adopting Bitcoin.
Yeah. And, here's some insight into running retreats, right? Retreats are a lot of work. You got all the planning and everything that goes into it. In addition, the week before is crunch time. That's when you got to make sure all your vendors are on board. That's when you got to make sure, all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, and like everyone's going to show up when they need to show up. So there's a lot of work the week prior. Then there's the actual 4-day retreat, which you're hosting people. And that requires a lot of energy because
you're there all day.
It's basically you're on call 24/7, and you got to make the guests happy. It's just, you're in the hospitality business. And then the week after, that's when you're closing off all the accounts and paying everybody, for their services and
recovering.
And we didn't get that because we went straight into adopting Bitcoin.
And we were zapped. Yeah. We were pooped.
We were tired. But I think we made the most of it. Adopting Bitcoin, again, another great conference. I think the best Bitcoin conferences happen in El Salvador because it was a very festive feel. They had the farmers market out there.
Yeah.
It just felt very relaxed. Again, the people that came to that conference, I feel, are very much aligned with the Bitcoin ethos. There was no shitcoiners. There was art, right? Again, I felt Bitcoin social layer one more time at the Adopting Bitcoin conference.
It was cool too to see some of the familiar faces from the having party. People that don't live in El Salvador, but they come down for the event. So like Delgado's Fuego, shout out.
Oh yeah.
Ali. Yeah. It was just cool to see some of those faces again.
And shout out to the Adopting Bitcoin event organizers, Kiki, James, Charlie. We had been working with them for, past 3-4 months, and it was great to see them, all their hard work come to fruition and throw on a great event. So shout out to you guys.
It was also cool for me. I got to moderate a panel, which I'd never done before. I'd never even dreamed of doing something like that, but I was invited to do so. And so for me, there was a process leading into that of just kind of discovering how that's done and how to create, good experience for the audience when you're moderating, the discussion of 4 or 5 people. So that was cool for me. And it also kind of inspired me because even before you and I were talking, should we submit some things so we could, talk at Adopting Bitcoin? Could you imagine if we had added that to our plate?
Thank God I didn't. I was just thinking that because I saw the level of stress you had. I mean,
and I was just moderating something. Yeah.
Jordan, you filled your plate. Not only were you moderating a panel, not only were you part of the retreat, but you were also doing a live performance, right? Musical live performance.
Oh yeah, there's that too. The Blink after party.
Yeah. And so, you had so much on your plate, and you managed and you did well. And so that was pretty inspirational to see. So
yeah, thank you. I totally forgot about that. Yeah, I was trying to record the audio, and I had kept the mics in my pocket, and it was all because I was so stressed out. So like I didn't do the equipment right, so we didn't have a musical recording of that night. But yeah, that was just an intense week all over the place. And not to mention, you and I had set up a recording studio at Adopting Bitcoin. It's because we were given a space to record, and we didn't even want to use it because we were just like, we had too much to do. But I think it also showed us personality wise, we would rather be out and about with everyone anyway than being in a studio. Like we like this studio here, bring people in, do our thing. But when you're at a conference, I think we just prefer to be out with everyone. And the 5-minute podcast format is kind of more where it's at.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that was November, pretty much, wrap things up.
Did anything else happen the second half of November? Something had to have happened.
Not really.
We've been trying to slow down around here.
I think we pretty much, I will say what happened psychologically. It was like, okay, first phase is done.
Yeah, that's right.
I
remember. The rest of November was just us figuring out the roadmap, the vision, like what's next, who are we, how are we going to structure this, what are all the things we're doing, what's the fat we can cut.
Yeah, because I think adopting Bitcoin for us was always like the marker, the target, which we were working towards. And we were just figuring it out until then. And we were, like you said, we were trying things out. We were experimenting. We were just taking on every project that we could take on. And then I think after adopting Bitcoin, it was like, okay, let's stop, let's regroup, let's analyze, and let's put a plan together for how we're going to move forward from here on out. Because I think the way we were operating was unsustainable.
Yeah, well, we didn't have a focus. And I guess you called it shiny object syndrome. We were just kind of like, hey, what can we do that can make some money? What can we do? What can we do to gain some social cred? And we were just doing everything. And it was finally time to be like, okay, what are we good at doing? What have we been doing? What do people know we do? And so that was the beginning of us seeing the split. Like Sovereignty Studios is now its own thing. It's got brand recognition. It's got headquarters. It's got equipment. But these other ambitions we have to do things such as tours or liaison type of thing, which we can get into later how that plays in, but making this course for Bill in El Salvador and just these other things, Sovereignpreneur Show, right? And starting to just split everything up. And so it's not just Sovereignty Studios, but it's segmented.
Yeah. Within the venture, the beginning venture of Sovereignty Studios, we have all these other ideas. Like even the retreat isn't really like Sovereignty Studios, work isn't like, it's its own thing, right? It's built in El Salvador. It's its own brand. It's its own company. Like that's the way it really should be treated. But we were all operating under Sovereignty Studios banner. And so now it's just like recognizing that, hey, these are different businesses. And now let's compartmentalize them and create a roadmap for each of those businesses.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's pretty much where we're at right now. But we can talk. I think this is a good place to talk about what the future has in store.
Yeah, we could. How long are we in? Do we want to keep going? I'm down. Whatever.
Oh, we're at 10 minutes.
Okay, we'll go for 10 more minutes.
Yeah, there's not too much to say.
Yeah.
Not yet.
So, actually, this is material that we haven't gone over or like really coordinated. So it's just literally.
This is material we've been discussing for about a month and making, not to say we're making decisions, but it's kind of like it's been very volatile and like, one day, this one path to take makes perfect sense. The next day, we're like, what were we thinking? That doesn't make sense at all. This makes sense. And then a week later, no, it's the first path that makes sense.
It's a discovery process.
Yeah, very organic and very, I guess, intuitive in the way we're going about this.
Yeah, but I think ultimately we want to get to the end of the year with a definitive plan, which we can follow.
Which we pretty much have at this point.
Yeah, so Sovereignty Studios is going to become solely a media production company. So if you need media services
in El Salvador,
we're your guys to hire. We're doing the Max and Stacy Golf Invitational, and we got a bunch of other potential jobs lined up in the future as well. So if you need media services over here, Sovereignty Studios.
Yeah, or if you offer media services, you want to talk to us, the team can always be expanded. And we've got this podcast studio that's going to continually be evolving and being upgraded, but we've got great equipment at this stage. So this studio is going to go up for rent at some point for creators that need a space. And we're starting to see Sovereignty Studios as its own thing, basically, because all these other things that we have in mind just don't fit. And it's good to clean them up so it makes sense in our heads and it makes sense in the public facing perception of what we're doing.
Yeah. And the Sovereignty Studio show is now going to be rebranded to the Sovereignpreneur Show, which is going to discuss sovereignty topics and entrepreneurial topics.
Which is essentially everything we've been doing anyway.
Yes.
So, but now we just have more clarity over it. Like, hey, what is Sovereignpreneur? Okay, it's like what we're doing. You're an entrepreneur. You build a sovereign life. You build towards the future. That's pretty much what we're all about. All right, so let's capture that audience now. Let's talk about that content. El Salvador obviously plays a role in there a bit because it's a place where sovereign individuals want to come. It fits into the thesis. So, but now we see, okay, Sovereignty Studios isn't really a YouTube channel. It might be one day regarding making media and things like that, like how we make media. But as far as Michael and I talking on screen, we're the sovereignpreneurs and we explore sovereignpreneurship.
And we are sponsored by Sovereignty Studios, though.
Exactly.
Yes. And then we have our Build in El Salvador, product suite, right?
Yeah.
Which
information business.
So we're developing out a free email course as we speak. And that's really going to help people who are interested in El Salvador, who are curious about El Salvador, who have been wondering about El Salvador, who have been seeing El Salvador in the headlines and potentially thinking of it as a place where they can build a presence. Our free email course is going to give you a lot of insight and clarity into those thoughts.
Yeah, so it's a crash course, just 5 days, and you just get it's like anyone can be interested in El Salvador, but maybe you don't want to move there, but you need to get the ball moving forward because it's it's pulling at you. Like, what's going on in El Salvador? So you sign up for this, and then for 5 days straight, you get emails in your inbox just covering all the basics so you can at least get in some clarity. And then from there, we're developing a paid course.
Yes. And that paid course is going to be fantastic. It's going to be amazing.
Going to be amazing.
Yeah.
The ultimate guide to building in El Salvador.
This is going to be specific information, actionable information. And not only that, but you're going to be able to come into an ecosystem that's already 100 plus people, of people interested in El Salvador, people living in El Salvador. You're going to have access to
our calls, our community calls,
expert interviews, also community calls with Jordan and I, where you get to talk to us personally, or not personally, but like in a group setting.
And ask your questions
ask your questions and get your curiosity satisfied. And then we're also going to continue on with the retreats, and we're probably going to add mastermind. So beyond just the digital community, you're going to be able to, interact with us in real life at events that we put together. And I think we've proven that we put some amazing events together. Yeah, some spectacular events. And so that'll be available for our community members as well.
Well, and one thing cool to note, that just the organic evolution of everything, we were talking about this yesterday, is like, we didn't know what we were going to build here. We had an idea. We had, signs. We had pushes in certain directions, and we explored things. And now here we are. And this paid course that we're working on comes from the workbook we've been, making and trying to upgrade for the retreat guests. Like, hey, come to the retreat. You got a workbook so you can fill things in. And that is now turning into this course, which is essentially the next step. So you're interested in El Salvador a little bit, you take the free thing, and then you're like, oh, hey, I kind of want to learn more. Then it's a really affordable price. You buy this course, and then you're like, all right, cool. Now I can start to see if I want to take a trip down there, right? So then the next step would be, oh, maybe I'll come to one of these retreats. So from the perspective of building a business here, everything we've been doing for the last year is now leading to this moment where we have this funnel to bring people in, to educate you about El Salvador, make a decision, make another decision, make another decision until you're here.
Yeah, we basically want to act as your guide, holding your hand through the whole process.
If you like how we think and operate, right?
Yeah.
Which is where the Sovereignpreneur Show comes in, our values. Back in March when I said at the Bitcoin Beach meetup, and I announced, I make videos and I'm a Bitcoiner and I want my kids to live with freedom. Like, you can hire anyone to make your videos, but you'd probably want to work with someone that shares your values. So in that sense, that's why we do the Sovereignpreneur Show, or this show. It's so like, hey, there's other people that introduce you to El Salvador, that do tours, that do retreats. But if you're into this sovereignty shit, we're the guys.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always better to work with people you align with, And I'm really excited about 2025. The weather right now is phenomenal, so it's like good spirits all the time. But I think that for me, putting together like an information business is something that I've been working towards a long time.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. Building out the funnel and creating the back end.
That's what we were both working on when we met, essentially. Yeah. We were both trying to do that.
Yeah. And doing the automation and then actually creating something of value. I think another point to talk about is, our retreats, I would say they were pretty cost prohibitive. Like, they weren't cheap. And so one of the things that we want to do is focus on bringing the price points down.
Because we want them to be about community.
Yeah.
Not about making money.
And to a level that's affordable to anyone. And I think that the information side of things, the digital side of things, is really the avenue to do that. Like I said, you come in, you get the free course. If you got value there, you can join the community. That's going to be pretty affordable as well. And then if you're in the community and you get value there, you can join the retreats, which we're working to get all the variables right to make affordable just for anyone as well. Yep. And so, like, trust me, we've done this for the past year. I mean, all the mistakes we made, all the lessons we learned go into like all of this material. And, for us, we just want to make it smooth, easy, stress-free for anyone interested in El Salvador.
Yep. Do we want to mention real quick, like what's in store for 2025? Maybe we've already mentioned most of it, but
What are you thinking?
well, no, I'm just thinking our situation here at the headquarters might be important to mention. So we really love this neighborhood because there's a nice forest behind it. It's brand new, blah, blah, blah. It's close to town, but not in the city. But because of all the economic development in El Salvador, all this progress going on, there's construction everywhere, and they're about to start 3 new apartment towers pretty much in the backyard here, which could essentially threaten how we do this podcast. And so that's just another growing pain hurdle we're going to have to cross.
Yeah.
2025.
Well, here's the thing. El Salvador has a housing shortage, right? Like I was kind of pissed off about like them developing these, apartment buildings and stuff like that. And because, yeah, like you said, it's going to interfere. There's going to be all these construction noises. And, I don't know if it's going to interfere with the podcast studio here. But so I went online and I started looking for other places to rent. And there's literally like nothing.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And whatever is available for rent isn't really up to the standards that we're looking for. And so, at the same time, I was like, you know what? Good for El Salvador. If they're going to attract top talent, they're going to have places to live at, And so this is growing pains, and we'll figure it out. Things fall into place. Something almost fell into place today. So, for me, the focus is on staying positive, solution oriented, keeping a good attitude, taking on challenges head on, not letting them bring you down, working on your self-talk, not allowing yourself to go into this negative spiral, and have faith that God will reward you. So that's kind of how I'm approaching 2025.
Yeah, a key point for me is I'm really excited that we can close the loop of what we started, create this whole Build in El Salvador vertical and put the value out there and automate as much as possible so we can help people solve their problem and then show up to community calls and build a community and then have these retreats. Like, I'm just happy that we can finish what we started. And I think it's an important lesson to note that nothing stays permanent. I would say in this life, there is no permanence, only what we can create from it. And so here we are, we might be finishing something, but come 2025, everything might change, right? But I'm excited that we can finish what we started. That's my ultimate takeaway is we're finishing what we started. It's going to be valuable. People are going to like it. It felt good doing it. We got to explore. We got to build a team. And I'm super stoked and proud of us all.
Hey, I agree. All right. I think that wraps it up.
I think so. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you around.
Peace.
See you next year.
Yeah.